Hi everyone, I am Neha Agrawal. I'm the founder of WiseUp and a proud alum of NTU Singapore. Today we have with us Armaan Dhanda, a second-year undergraduate student at NUS Singapore. He received the prestigious Science and Technology Scholarship worth 1.5 crores. Today, Armaan is going to share with us the admission requirements, scholarship criteria, and his journey at NUS Singapore. So, without further delay, let's get started. So, Armaan, thank you so much for coming to our WiseUp podcast. And we would love to know more about studying in Singapore from you. So, please tell us, let's start the session. Please tell us something about yourself.
Sure. So firstly, thank you so much for having me on the episode. I've been a viewer, a subscriber for a long time. It's nice to nice to be on the episode. And I'm Armaan. I'm a second year undergraduate student in chemical engineering with the second major in innovation and design at NUS. And I'm also the co-founder of a sustainable pet nutrition company called Possible Foods. And yeah, extremely interested in creating an impact in the future of food.
That's amazing to hear. So, Armaan, tell us about your journey. How did you get admission at NUS and how did you prepare for studying abroad?
That's a very interesting question, Neha. So, seventh grade was the first time that we came to Singapore as a family,
Hmm.
and my parents arranged a trip to NTU. It was very different from anything that I had seen ever in life, and it just created a dream in my mind. And the only thing I knew back then was that you need very high grades to get in. So I started optimizing for grades back in seventh grade, and hopefully and thankfully it continued throughout my high school journey. That was the initial introduction to Singapore.
Mhm. And then after that, what about high school? So were you preparing for JEE in India? Because that's like the most common exam that you give, right? To get admissions in engineering. Or you were very clear that you want to study abroad.
Yeah, so I had opted out of SAT, of the ACT, for JEE, for NEET, everything. I was very confident that I can do well in my boards, and I just optimized for that. It simplified my life a lot. I did not want to study in India. I applied to Canada, to the UK, to Hong Kong, and Singapore.
So when it comes to studying abroad, most people want to study in the US. So why did you not choose US? And then secondly, why did you decide to go ahead with Singapore out of all the other countries that you had applied to?
That's a great question, Neha. So, I think with the US, right, there was always a notion that my parents had that it's too expensive, it's too far, and it's also too open a society for an 18-year-old person who has been sheltered their whole life. It's like a huge change. So yeah, Singapore stood out there, especially the proximity to India. I think it's a 5.5 hour flight. If you're in Chennai, it's a 3.5 hour flight. It's nothing. I try to come back every 2 months. I'm very close to my family, so that was like the most important point. Because मतलब ये कहते हैं ना, अगर कोई यूएस जाता है, यूएस में ही रह जाता है. I think that's not
Correct.
true for Singapore. You can come back very often. The quality of education is, especially in Asia, is unparalleled. The access to resources and infrastructure that you can get, and how you can create opportunities that are centered around you is brilliant. The curriculum is rigid enough yet flexible enough to do
Mhm.
to do exactly what you want to do. To add a point there, I think the fact that Singapore is drug free and to an extent imposes certain restrictions of alcohol and smoking, or like alcohol consumption on campus, that gave a sense of security to my parents.
Right. I think that is so important because a lot of parents reach out to me as well, and especially when they're sending out their girl child, right?
Yeah.
And one of the major questions that they always have is how safe is Singapore? And I always go ahead and I tell them, Singapore is probably safer than India in that manner. I was actually going through your LinkedIn profile and I came to know that you attempted the first year, you did not get in. And after that, you took admission at St. Stephen's College in Delhi. And then after that, you attempted another time, another year. And then that is when you got admission in Singapore. And that too with the SNT scholarship, which is like one of the most difficult scholarships to get. So could you tell us more about that as to what happened and then how did you decide to apply the next year and then finally manage to get in?
Sure. So, the
Mhm.
board exam results, which usually come out in May, they came out in end July and batch begins on 1st August. So it was a delay in board exam marks. I think the last day that they accept grades is 16 July, but the ISC board release goes on 24 July. So 80% of my batchmates have taken a gap year and have come from India.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So it was
70.
because the Indian board exam results were released so late that,
Yeah,
I mean, Singapore admissions, of course, couldn't wait
correct,
beyond a certain timeline, right?
correct,
And so the classes were full by the time
correct.
your board
So,
results came out for them to
correct.
evaluate.
So I scored a 98.75%. I know people who are here who had 99.8. So I think they only took a very few people who applied for courses that weren't already full.
Hmm. Understood. Okay. Now I'd love to know more about the scholarship because Singapore education, especially undergrad, also not that cheap, right?
Yeah,
For 4 years of education, if I'm not wrong, you will end up spending 1.2 CR if you're not taking any scholarship or any bond obligation. So definitely scholarship is one way to reduce the tuition fees and burden on your parents. So can you
true.
tell us more about this scholarship? So firstly, what is this S&T scholarship? How much of your tuition fee is waived off? Is there any bond attached with this scholarship? Then you can tell us how many people usually get this scholarship.
Sure.
And yeah.
So scholarship or the bond that I'm on, it's a 6-year agreement. So a 4-year degree followed by 6 years of being in Singapore. And they pay for your tuition fee fully. They cover your accommodation for the year, for all 4 years. They also give you a stipend of about $500 a month for food and other expenses. And your first flight from India to Singapore and your last flight from Singapore to India, that's also funded. So a lot of benefits, purely monetary in terms of compensation, are there. To my knowledge, there are about 5 people who get it every year, and you can't apply for it. You have to be nominated for it. The university will reach out and say that your grades qualify for the S&T. Would you like to consider this? That is followed by an interview, and if you're able to convey how you're able to contribute in that interview and be yourself, then you're given the chance to opt for the scholarship.
But what do you think is the major difference between Indian education and Singapore education? Now that you've studied 1 year at St. Stephen's and after that you've come to NUS, do you think there is a very big difference in quality of education? And that I mean specifically classroom teaching.
Okay.
Hmm.
Stephens had 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. lectures every day. I had a math class 2 to 3 hours every day, 6 days. So 12 hours of math, 15 hours of math a day, a week, which is insane. The value creation there is your fundamentals are very sound. You're forced to do
Hmm.
it. At NUS, because there's no attendance for lectures in most cases, tutorials are compulsory once a week or once every 2 weeks. There's a lot of focus on independent learning. Depends on what the individual values. I value independent learning more than somebody telling me essay, essay, essay. I clearly remember I was not taking notes at Stephens. The teacher came and said, "Where's your notebook?" I was like, "Am I back to school? Am I back to school with this?" Depends on the personality. Also, if you're interested in building a research career, having your fundamentals right is very important. You can also do that independently, but if somebody is forcing you to do it, then
Works
India,
better with.
yeah.
Hmm.
But flexibility, I think, is the biggest point. वहां पे 6 दिन जाना पड़ता था, यहाँ 6 घंटे है. So
I mean,
it's
if
a
you think about it, agar 9 to 6, if you're studying in the classroom, you don't have time and energy left to do literally anything else.
so okay. I'll give
So,
context. I was
yeah,
traveling from Gurgaon to North Delhi. My day started at 6. I would travel 6 to 7 was gym for me. 7 to 8:30 was travel in the metro. 8:30 to 9 was the morning assembly. 9 to 6 were classes, and it was May June का period जब humid हो गया है पूरा.
crazy, crazy, crazy.
Lab में you can't switch on the exhaust or the fan because you're using a burner. You're wearing a coat, so you're sweating through and through. And then once 6 बज गए, then there's society work until 7, 8. And then you travel back home at 9:30 and you're just gone. And that for Monday to Saturday. So right now, like once I visualize कि ये किया हुआ है कुछ महीनों के लिए, gratitude feels कि यार बहुत freedom है अभी तो, अभी अभी क्या रोना अभी क्या रोना.
True, true. Yeah. I think that's the major difference between I think Indian education system and what you get to see abroad.
Yeah, true.
So tell us something, Arman. Like out of this cohort of Indian students who are joining either an NTU or NUS in Singapore, what is the percentage likelihood of them getting a job? Like 70%, 80% of people will any estimate that you have so that it gives more confidence to the
Correct.
people.
I think the best source would be to go on NUS's website.
Mm-hmm.
They post their results very often, and the last time I read was, again, I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
100% of people who graduated got a job within 6 months. So NUS
That's good.
prides itself on leading to employment after graduation. But it'll be the best to go onto the website to see official numbers, official
Mm.
starting salaries. And also, if you think the salaries are low, that's the median salary. If you're an outlier, you can
Definitely
definitely
get
get a
higher.
lot more. Yeah. Because
Got it.
ideally, a lot of people think, right? If I'm spending, let's say, $250,000 on an education, or 200,000 Singapore dollars on an education, and I'm only getting $5,000 a month, I would rather be in the US. Like the biggest factor of people wanting to go to the US is the money that's offered in the job, right? Here is slightly low, but taxes are also low.
Exactly. So
Correct.
I think taking that into account is very important when you're comparing median salaries between US and Singapore.
Correct.
Nearly whatever they are saying you get, you actually get it.
True.
So for people who are not on an SNT scholarship, but probably they've just taken the bond where only your tuition fees gets covered, but living
Yeah.
expenses still can be quite high. If my estimate is not wrong, it's approximately 1,000 Sing dollars per month on an average,
Yeah.
or is
So
it lesser?
housing, if you're on campus, it should be $600 to $700.
Right.
Food, if you're not, if you don't overindulge, it should
Hmm.
be $15 a day, five to six
Okay.
dollars a meal, $15 to $20 a day, 20 at the tops.
Hmm.
So if it's 20, then it's 600 there. So about 1,200, maximum 1,500.
1,200, 1,300 right there.
Yes.
Yeah. So minimum then I would place it as 1,000 Sing dollars if you're really like trying to save
Yeah.
money. But on the higher side, I mean, there's no upper limit to
There's no
spending
problem.
in Singapore. There's absolutely no upper limit. But for people who still want to lead a comfortable life, I would say around 1,500 Sing dollars on a monthly basis. So, how do you make up for that living expenses? Do you have enough part-time options available on campus, off campus? And if you can tell us more about type of job opportunities and pay for these job opportunities.
Sure, sure. So I think part-time opportunities exist.
Mm-hmm.
I took a very cognizant call that I'd want to do a part-time role, mostly in a research position, because I see
Mm-hmm.
value creation as well as skills being enhanced while getting
Mm-hmm.
some extra pocket money. So most cases, it's about $10 to $20 an hour that you get, and you can work 16 hours a week. That's the mandate for people who are studying. So if it's like $15 and $16 an hour a month, you can get $960, 960 to $1,000, which can make up for your living expenses.
So thanks for that. For people still wanting to know more about part-time options, I think as Arman said, one is working in a research lab. So that way, not only you get some research exposure, but you end up earning some money that offsets your living expenses. Apart from that, you have a lot of odd jobs on campus. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you can assist in the library for I think $8 to $10 an hour, or you can work in the supermarkets again for $8 to $10
Yeah,
an hour. Apart from that, I think you can also take internships, right, parallelly while studying, and those could be on campus or off campus internships, in the sense that they could be virtual internships where literally everything you're doing online, you don't really have to go to the
correct.
company, or it could be a hybrid model where few days you work from campus, but just 1 or 2 days you go to the company and you work there, right?
Correct. What a lot of my friends are doing is they teach students who are still in high school or secondary school, and they get pretty good money. I've heard all the way from $40 to $80 an hour as well, or offer like a session for 2 hours. So that's good money. But in a lot of cases, they want you to make the trip to their house.
Hmm.
So that becomes extra travel, extra money, extra
Right.
time that goes, extra energy that goes. So you have to be cognizant of the opportunities you want to eye.
Absolutely. All right. And I think I've had a wonderful conversation with you today. And personally, I have learned a lot from your journey. So thanks for
Thank you.
sharing that. And now, just one final question, that if there was anything you'd like to suggest or share any strategy with students who are planning to apply to Singapore, what would that be?
Okay, so if you're applying for NUS or NTU, the thing that they look at most seriously is your grades. Most likely your ISC or CBSE grades.
Mhm.
12th grade much more than 10th grade. They don't place a lot of importance on that. If you're applying for NUS college, which is the new Yale NUS, in that scenario, they're looking for a more holistic profile. What other things you're doing outside of academics? But yeah, it's mostly that. If you're just wanting to get to NUS NTU, it's mostly marks.
Got it. All right. So thank you so much, Armaan. It was wonderful interacting with you today, and thank you for sharing such important insights with us.